Okay, hello everyone. I'm Svetlana. I'm gonna be the chair for this discussion, which is life after university of free choice or the lack of one. And actually, initially, I thought it would be a very easy discussion. It's general talk. It's before the wine reception. Everyone is anticipating this, and we're gonna hear just from everyone's opinion on the topic. But then if you think about it, the mere fact that it's us here gathered, Bulgarians doing very interesting topics, researching on really interesting academic issues, or doing having experience in all these companies that you heard from the previous panel, it's already telling enough, and it sets the narrative for the discussion that we're not in Bulgaria, we're here. And this in itself could be seen as a lack of choice. So what I wanted to discuss first is just probably briefly hear from everyone and discuss what is their justification for what they want to do, and how they see their field and in perspective, and what is the perspective for this field either in the UK or in Bulgaria or probably in another country. We have, from the people here, we have people working in academia. We also have people in companies, big companies, or people starting their own business, either here or in Bulgaria. So I'd like to give the floor to some of our speakers to share their view of what's the future of their field, either here or back home.
So should we start with the ladies first?
So for me personally, as I said, I wanted a career in finance, and when you compare the market and the financial industry in the UK with the financial industry in Bulgaria, I would say that the Bulgarian ones, because I did an internship in a bank in Bulgaria, I did an internship at Bulgarian Stock Exchange, and I kind of seen both sides of Bulgarian and how the UK financial sector is developing. So, like, when you compare both, like, I would say that the Bulgarian financial sector represents maybe just 10% of the UK one. It's obviously a really, really big sector here, and of course offers a lot of opportunities, more than in Bulgaria. However, having a small market in Bulgaria doesn't mean that you cannot establish a market. It might be a niche. So it's again how you see both sides.
Do you think that the University of National Economics and
National and World Economics
is producing way too many specialists in finance for the sector in Bulgaria?
In Bulgaria, generally, there are three main universities that you can study finance, let's say, or accounting, or general business. The Varna one, the Cenov Academy, and the University of National and World Economy. And yeah, looking at that point of view, there are too many economies in Bulgaria for the scope of the economy that we have. So I would rather focus the education in a different field, maybe IT, engineering, maybe agriculture, maybe tourism.
So you find these sectors to be more lucrative and more prominent in Bulgaria. How about the real estate? This Black Sea coast should be protected.
well, they should have done, didn't they? Well, it's quite interesting because I did some internships in Bulgaria as well, and my experience was actually pretty good. So it was because I was studying here, and then I went home after my first year because sort of internship schemes weren't really offered here for first year students at the time. But how much I learned, it's just like I actually watched a lecture by this Bulgarian IT guy, and he was explaining his choice for staying. They did a TEDx talk, and he was explaining his choice for staying. He put it beautifully. Back home is like it's shambles. It's like really big chaos, but then you have the chance and the opportunity to kind of put order to it. And there's so many more things that you can explore, do, and fix. That it makes, and you have to fix it yourself, not with kind of the support system that you have here. So it's really interesting and actually pretty challenging. In a good way, challenging, I say. As you said, so I don't actually think it's 10%, it's probably 0.1% of the financial sector back home to what it is here, but it just depends on what floats your boat. If you're really interested to kind of be entrepreneurial, there's definitely so many options back home. If you want to be entrepreneurial here, you have the kind of, as I said, the support mechanism to do it, but it's much more difficult to find a niche because the market's outcompeted. Anything that I've had that as a student so many times, like, oh man, I just came up with this genius idea, like, I should definitely go and do it, and then I open the internet and it's there. It's there for 5 other businesses, so it's massively outcompeted here. But if you want to go into something complex, finance is such a massive behemoth sector that the brain teasers that you're faced with are pretty big for because it's just so developed. And lots to learn, so both.
Can I just add something? I'm not saying that my experience in Bulgaria wasn't useful. It was useful, but compared to the financial market in the UK, it just wasn't really the whole market.
Yeah.
So you have learned so much to cover the whole market here, for example. But I agree with you having a lot of opportunities to develop the new business in Bulgaria. Because, for example, in Bulgaria, as far as I know, there is no hedge fund, for example. I think the first legislation about hedge fund has been created last year. So there are a lot of opportunities if you want to start something.
Just saying that I wasn't disagreeing, I was just making a different point. But
Could I possibly draw the topic to back to what you were you started with, a bit more generally, not so much talking about the financial services field or the economy itself. It's more about the choice where you want to go after college, or even before that, when you're in high school. Should you stay in Bulgaria or go outside? I've struggled with that question for a while. I always thought that my path would lead me to education and I'll be teaching one day, having a bigger goal or purpose would be to, working to change the education system in Bulgaria. And I thought, well, what is the best way to actually change things in Bulgaria? Because that's the end goal. And I'm thinking, well, you spearhead for education. You want to change the mentality of the people. You want to change what is being taught, how the media explains things to the people. You want to change the general populace, and you want to change the basic dynamics of the country. These are the things that are going to change everything else. From that, I was thinking, well, should you be in Bulgaria? And I have a lot of friends who, and in my class, in my high school, I wasn't the smartest kid. I was like probably the 10th one. And most of my friends stayed in Bulgaria. And they had great potential. And they're doing quite all right, don't get me wrong. But I think that their goals have shrunk. And I think when you go outside, you gain a different perspective. You learn how things are done somewhere else. You have more to contribute if you have developed as a professional outside. Additionally, I think that a lot of us already feel some sense of pride on the individual level. Personally, you feel like you have achieved a lot. And there's something that now you can contribute towards, the community, to the society. A lot of us, still wish to go back home one day. And I think it's easier for us, given, how ambitious most people are who are going out of Bulgaria, to actually establish yourself, become financially independent, or proud of what you have achieved. So then you can actually let the ego aside and go back to Bulgaria and actually work without really expecting something in return. Whereas I think it's a lot harder to achieve that in Bulgaria. So my personal view is, and I've always thought, if I was like in some way commander-in-chief or whatever in Bulgaria, I would put such a mechanism where like most of the youngsters that graduate from high school go outside of the country, so they gain a different perspective. And I would bind them to come back. I wouldn't bind them. I think that they would like to. I mean, it's if you're going back to Bulgaria, one, because you have a chance to really make a contribution and do something incredible. Because here, I mean, even when Laura was speaking about Telefonica and she's doing something amazing there. It depends obviously on the person. You feel in your career you have achieved a lot, but then you still feel like you owe something back to the community. And the individual that has that feeling, is the one that should really, does not go back without any incentive necessary or needs to be bound in some way. I just want to give an example and I'll finish my talk because I just didn't want to hog the conversation. Right now there's a Bulgarian who actually graduated from OSC. Her name is Blagovesta. Some of you might have heard of her, others not. She started an organization called Podarete Kniga, Give a Book. And she graduated from OSC. She could have stayed here and worked here. She decided to go back home, continue to nurture the organization. She worked at Deloitte, I believe. And then now she's working for the Bulgarian Development Holding, which is basically a company that is financed from Chinese investors that's going to build a golf park, course, casinos, whatever, in Elin near Sofia. And she's actually in London right now, and we're going to grab drinks later on today. She started this organization, Podarete Kniga, and it actually has regional offices throughout the country. And her initial idea was, I'm going to give books to children in orphanages, so that I try and teach them something, like they inspire love for books. And that didn't quite work. I mean, it worked to an extent, but what was really needed was the human contact. So then what she had was, she had volunteers who basically become the kids' buddies. So you have your own buddy, and you're like their bigger brother or sister. So you spend like a few hours every week on the phone or in person, and you're kind of nurturing them, coaching them on how to go through their life, talk through their life crisis at the age that they are. And she has done that, without having any special background, whatever, staying in Bulgaria. So, although I'm saying, you need to go outside, and she did, just for her masters, you could achieve just as much inside. And I guess I'm kind of defending my own point. I think she's more of the exception rather than the rule. But I think there are great things that can be achieved no matter where you are. I do think that outside, when I go back to Bulgaria, when I ask someone, do you know what TED Talks is?
Yeah.
Most people don't know. Here, majority of Bulgarians I speak to do know, and they love it. When we start discussing, how you can change society, blah, 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 all the big topics. And I think that culture needs to be brought back home, and we get that when you go outside. And I think that's lost, and that's what was my earlier point with a lot of my classmates, have lost that spark, thank you, yes, when they've stayed home. I'm not saying that that's like in any way a research project that I can conclude something, but it's my anecdotal evidence.
Well, it's actually, I mean, everything that you've said, I so much agree with. I can't express it, but to say I agree. But it's a model that the Nordics are doing right now. So Denmark, Sweden, Norway, they're paying. If you go abroad, they pay the whole education, and they encourage you to go abroad to get that international experience. And then everyone, there's loads of people that go back, and that's exactly kind of it's a bright example as to how they've achieved it, and that's exactly what they do. So I was lucky enough to kind of be in a crowd of Scandinavians in university, and all of their education and degrees were kind of paid, and then they have scholarships to Harvard and all that stuff, and then the whole idea is, and you're not blinded. So some Asian countries like Singapore and Malaysia do that as well, or companies do that as well, but they bind them to go back, whereas the Nordics don't, but they do come back, just because they broaden their horizons and then contribute with the whole idea of contributing back to society. What you're saying as well kind of ties up to what I wanted to say, and that's, for example, my parents always say, you're abroad and you should stay there because here is really, really bad. And then don't go too far. Don't stay in Europe and then don't go too far. I think this perception of kind of geography and should we stay here, should we go back to Bulgaria, or should we go to the States, or it's kind of nowadays is becoming a bit more redundant. I think because of technology, because of the decreasing cost of travel. TED is actually in Bulgaria now. They organize TED Talks, and they know themselves. People that probably, I know the people that organize it, and 2/3 of them have never actually been abroad. So it's just, abroad can reach you much quicker and easier through kind of the internet. So it kind of defeats borders. And actually, I have a really, really kind of pleasant experience every time, because I expect there's a lot of people that I meet, and they literally don't know what I'm talking about when they ask me how I am and what I do, which is normal. But at the same time, I actually have loads of people that I would have never expected them to know the stuff that they know. unless they've been abroad. So it's just that's slowly starting to happen, and people are kind of being more open-minded. But it's just kind of making that kind of is a big push.
So do you think we should organize these back home?
Sorry.
Do you think we should organize this back home?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually I think he was one of the guys that was here last year. He decided, he was on the news as well, and like, oh wow, like he decided to basically quit and go on, he's from Russia, and he went and like started teaching.
Yeah,
so he started teaching, and so that's pretty awesome, right? Like I have, actually it's interesting that you say that. Like I always kind of thought, okay, I'm gonna get all the experience that I could get outside, like learn about everything, like not just finance and like just technology, everything. Coaches, like different coaches, people from everywhere, and then just retire at 30, go back home and teach. And like just all the stuff that has happened to me, kind of just try to pass on the knowledge basically, which is an amazing thing to do, and I think we should all try to do it somehow.
Yeah, I just have one question, just to follow on to the topic you're just discussing, and that is complacency. So how can you help people overcome complacency? Because sometimes I find it quite hard to say to someone, well, you're making 50k here, go back to Bulgaria, work for half that money. People are going to be a lot more stubborn, and they're not going to try and actually listen to you, even though you can have great ideas to develop things. So how can you...
half that money you're not going to earn back home, but I mean, complacency is everywhere. Complacency is here as well, because the more stable and kind of comfortable your environment, like the more chilled out you are as well. I mean, complacency is absolutely everywhere, I think. In fact, back home, people in some respects are less complacent than people here. But can you kind of narrow it down a bit, maybe with an example?
Well, it's not a personal example, but for example, I've seen plenty of people who literally wouldn't live their life simply because they've grown so much within the infrastructure they've worked for. They also become very dependent on particular infrastructure to do their jobs or businesses, and they know, well, I have to go back to Bulgaria and rebuild all of that, and they think that Bulgaria is still very rigid and it's not very trying to sort of implement new systems or new infrastructures. Whatever sector you want to look at it.
If I could weigh in on that topic. So going back to Bulgaria doesn't have to be your whole future. I mean, for example, the same guy you mentioned, Yavor, he's actually a very good friend of mine, so I keep in touch with him regularly. And his plan is actually not to stay in Bulgaria forever. He graduated here, and he started working at PwC. He was promoted several times. At a certain point, he said, "Well, it's time to move on. It's time to try something different." And until I figure out what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to go back to my town and help some young people make a clear choice about their future. And he's actually working at our school without any compensation. He's there coaching the kids in economics, giving them advice for future careers and for university. But this is not what he's planning to do for life. He has other plans. But just at this point, he has decided to do something useful, to give back to his hometown.
But that's personal incentive, which is kind of what we're trying to get here to. Like it's you know, there is this mentality, and I think I've seen it in people here, but it's kind of prevalent. So people complain quite a lot. People just human nature is to complain. Like it's not a Bulgarian trait. It's human nature. And you know, and you're more often than not trying to kind of you understand what's wrong in the situation, but you're kind of seeking for external factors to justify it rather than looking deep inside. And it sounds a bit philosophical, but like it's really, you can always do something about that. That's kind of my personal opinion. You can always do something about to change your situation or other people's situation, or whatever you want to change. So it's just a personal initiative, I guess. Which because how many people will do that? I mean, not many. I think like they will probably go back and like think about it and try to figure out their own way, but then I don't know. Like it's just,
I'm not sure I agree, because I don't come actually from the business perspective. So I come from the academic perspective. I want to stay in academia. I have worked, however, in Bulgaria. I've had several internships at the top competing marketing firms. And because kind of the discussion is about free choice or lack of free choice, when I was there, I was witness to quite a lot of pressures from, let's call them third parties, to actually influence the firms themselves, the results that come out. While I was in one of the firms, a man came with a briefcase full of money and tried to argue with the director to change the result of a recent poll and to give favour to specific political parties. Now, having been witness to that, I'm not sure to what extent there is that freedom in certain areas. And moreover, if we are to look specifically in academia in Bulgaria, because I'm quite familiar with the Bulgarian Academy of Sciences, and as a social sciences and humanities, I'm especially familiar with the ethnography, sociology, and folklore institutes. A few years back, money was cut to them up to the extent that these institutes, which by the way had a long history of hating each other, could not have survived on their own. They surprised everybody by actually combining and becoming one institute. That was against the grain because nobody thought that was possible. So they have actually found a way to survive. But through this merger, a lot of people obviously lost their jobs. So there's less and less opportunities rather than ability for more in academia in Bulgaria. In specifically mine, I don't know how it is in physics. But then
Even
further,
worse.
even worse. But then further to that, there is also a constraint with regard to what you can research, because if you don't have money for travel, for grants, for being able to expand what you want to research, then obviously you're not going to be able to do much more beyond books and theories, which means no possibility for commercialization, no possibility to get revenue in, and then hopefully move the actual machine. Like as we know, for example, Cambridge, the engineering department brings in so much money that they're able to not only live off that, but even support quite a big part of the university. So without that, there is kind of a stagnation. So people like me who have graduated here would have a problem, not only for the monetary reasons, but also simply finding a position and being able to do the job without other constraints, whether political, whether the guys with the suitcase or whatever it might be, to how to overcome these. So it's almost like, to answer your question, I don't know if we do have a choice at the moment, because there's nowhere for me to go in Bulgaria. I can't go to my own school. Even the NBU, which is a good school, is not being accredited, which means I cannot start up a company, I cannot create a niche, and I cannot quite fit in what exists there. So then I have the choice of staying here and getting as much experience as I can.
But then again, to touch upon the point that Krasi made is, do you think that it's actually, if you don't have the choice to make a difference in Bulgaria, do you think you can influence the situation there from here? Your field, academia, and social sciences and humanities, is probably one of the few fields in which you can actually do research in Bulgaria. And as you told me earlier today, it's actually a field that is pretty interesting to people to research on these days. Do you think this is relevant or not necessarily?
It is, but there is still a disjunction. So even if people want to research Bulgaria like I do with the energy protests, and even non-Bulgarians, so for example in Cardiff University, Bella Dix with her team went to Bulgaria to study the phenomenon of the necrolog, death certificates, which don't exist in other cultures, ergo they're interesting to study and research. And they didn't have any Bulgarians on their team. So there is kind of the interest to research Bulgaria and the ability to do so. But then there's also the problem of, once you do the research, you most likely publish it in English. It never actually goes back and feeds into the Bulgarian system, so it doesn't really help the whole way.
As another person involved in academia, let me give you my opinion. I left Bulgaria to come and study here because I couldn't find the conditions to study what I wanted to develop myself in Bulgaria, and I think that's very understandable, and that's something we can't argue about. However, if you really want to do academia, you can contribute so much to Bulgaria, even from abroad. Say, for example, if Nicola here develops a cure for cancer, everybody is going to know that the cure for cancer was developed by Bulgaria.
No, but the research group that you work for in University of Oxford.
Yeah.
So cure for cancer was discovered in Oxford. Yeah.
The question is how much the Bulgarian will actually benefit from that if they cannot actually buy the drug. So
And also the patent will be held by Oxford, not by any Bulgarian, not by him.
So I'm not talking about the patent.
Do you want to?
Yeah, I actually want to say that I totally agree with you that I find it extremely sad every time that I tell somebody, oh yeah, I actually want to go home and actually want to help people. I want to, do my research in Bulgaria because I think that's how I'm actually going to help people more, or at least I'll be at least home and I'll be more involved in what I'm doing and more involved with the people I care about and so on. But every time that I speak with somebody, for example, if I speak with Diane, he tells me, oh yeah, well technically I can actually do all my work on the computer, so yeah, good for me, I can work from anywhere in the world, and I can develop this wholesome theory about Interstellar 2, where they don't go to the black hole, and then yeah, you can use a computer, or you can use something like that. And I can probably apply for a fund from the EU or from somewhere else to actually fund my research in terms of, yeah, okay, I can pay my salary, I can pay probably another person to study with me or do something else, but then in terms of equipment, which is then the big question, I'll probably need both their salaries, 4 or 3 of your salaries actually, for several years, just to be able to fund a small kind of lab that will allow me to do anything. Like this microscope that I showed you today, this small, very simple one, costs £250,000. Even if I ask half the European money, to go to Bulgaria for research, I probably won't be able to, populate this nice lab as you would do, for example, here. And that actually kills me because I want to go home, I want to do my research there, I want to help there, I want to say, people to say, oh yeah, actually Bulgaria is a nice place to do research, it's a cool place to do research, look how he's publishing and so on. But then I actually cannot, because if you go to an institute here, they ask you, okay, do you bring money? But they ask you money for yourself, for your salary, for anyone else's salary, and for some consumables. But in terms of actual equipment, in terms of actual setting, infrastructure, whatever, it's already there. I don't have to do anything for it. But if I have to basically renovate the whole of the biological field just because it's been stale there, if you don't get enough money, I do follow the research that comes out of Bulgaria. Trust me, I do, and then as I compare it to the ones that it's done here, well, unfortunately we lose.
But to what extent is that Bulgaria versus staying with Bulgaria versus the UK? Because surely, again, this is kind of this mentality of like so bad back home, and I can only be in this. So the UK and the US are the two, like one of the two leading sort of investors in science and just biomed, like physics, like all of those things. I'm sure like Italians that probably come here as well. I'm sure like maybe even like maybe not Germans, but like just people who have like a fantastic kind of society and all that. They all the Nordics people, like they'll probably try to go to Oxford and Cambridge, right? Or like all those universities. It's not really that much anymore about Bulgaria versus like it's so bad in Bulgaria. It's like great here, and it kills me because I can't go back home. It's a very valid point. You can't expect the investment and the infrastructure to just suddenly appear there, and probably it will not happen for another 100 years. But it's like that in many developed countries and developed economies. Just to get back to the point, maybe I guess really quickly. My mom is in academia back home. She's in social science. She's German philology. So if she was to live on her salary and her salary only, it would never happen. Like she's lucky because it's just we as a family kind of like we're okay, but she's never. I don't actually think she's ever dependent on her university kind of salary. She does it because she loves it, and she does it because she wants to kind of develop in that area. And she does a lot of presentations, but on the side, and just to support herself to be able to do her research, she does a lot of translations. She does a lot of paid work. But that's what I'm saying. It's like multiple jobs. And her eyes are really bad because like she's had to pull like all-nighters. She still does actually like translating jobs and all that stuff. But like it's that ability to kind of just change your personal circumstances. It's just the environment I've been brought in as well. It's just I've never been allowed to kind of say, well, that's bad, and so
I think he very much mixing two things, because what he's talking about is the technological ability to do research, which is that kind of funding. You're also highlighting the love of what you do, which is what a lot of Bulgarian people in academia, like even the guy I was talking about, Christian Vakov, is in Bulgaria. And the research that they produce, like the research I was trying to highlight earlier in my talk, was really, really good. So I don't think that the quality of the research that comes out at the moment has anything to do with the circumstances per se. It just constrains what you can do. So the fact that there is no technology like that means that no research in this field will happen.
So technology is very capital intensive.
Yeah,
So-
but the thing is that the fields that do exist then could potentially be very, very good.
So they are, which is what you're saying. I'm not disagreeing, but that's proof. That's case in point. Proof that it doesn't matter where you're based, as long as you're producing quality stuff. Yeah, you're probably hindered because she has to do all that other stuff and like not devote herself entirely. But she can easily go to. She's been offered so many like positions. She publishes her research and it's in German, so you know she gets noticed. She gets cited all the academics definition of success, and so it's just like really. But she's just there. It's just that's her entire life. Like she actually graduated from Germany, came back, and it was just her choice. She never really wanted to kind of leave afterwards. So it's
Let's hear from some other people from the.
Just to reply, I'm not in biology or in research for money. I don't think anyone is here.
Well, it would be
no, I wasn't implying that. I'm just saying that there's
Very
the
interesting
equipment,
point.
the
Like,
equipment
cover
is
to your rights.
3000 level for 1.2, 1.5 ml for some reagent, then I cannot. Then I get. There's no point in
I
me.
absolutely agree with you.
I can translate, obviously. I mean, it's fun,
Yeah.
but.
So science is very different. Social science is very different to actual science.
Let's hear from someone who's get funding from a big company.
I was actually going to make comments on something else.
Forgot already.
But one thing I was going to say is, back to the previous discussion, is it necessarily a fair comparison? Because, you know, if you're going back to Bulgaria, you're not going to aim, or at least in Bulgaria, you shouldn't expect that you will catch up with Germany to become the leading car manufacturer, something of the sort, right? You want to set up some sort of niche industry that doesn't exist anywhere else, and then sort of create a new market in which to contribute. And another thing I wanted to say was, so some time back I was talking to a friend of mine who was head of foreign investment in Bulgaria, and I asked them, is there a problem with the lack of funding in Bulgaria? They said no, the problem is not the lack of funding. The problem is it's difficult to find people with creative ideas in Bulgaria. So, I don't know, I guess.
But don't you get creative ideas the same way he has? You have to see something. You have to be in an environment where you actually compare yourself to others and say, oh, wait a minute, I'm not probably that brilliant because there are other people who've seen so much, and then you start building ideas, then you start becoming creative. It's not something you're just born creative. Well, some people were, but they really you had
I would like to, so this is more of a general comment, which is probably going to shift the topic a little bit, but
we're not
Define a little bit.
But the problem is the following. We've been leading this conversation for a while now, and I'm sure it's been led 1,000 times, and it always comes to the same thing. Scientists and engineers don't get their equipment in Bulgaria because it's absolutely incredibly expensive. Finance, you know, people who are in finance just don't get the same playing field that they do in the UK. And you want to win big, so you're going to go somewhere where you can, you know, be big. So my problem is, we are trying to find out good reasons why we can go back home. So we, as probably some of the most educated people in the world, can actually find a reason to prosper there, when there isn't one, because we're lacking. It's not the brain that's lacking, it's the blood of the whole thing. So we haven't got the muscle and the sinew in Bulgaria, the people who make bread, the people who fix cars, the people who fix computers. Those people are not there because they run to other countries because it's much easier for them. And so you want to go there and you want to have a great idea, you want to make a business, great, but you haven't got the workers there, you haven't got the people. So I think it's not the problem that it's us, the people who are at that high academic level, at that high corporate level that are running away. It's the people in the sort of middle to lower level that, because we ran away, they ran away, and now we're trying to find a reason to come back. But they're not going to come back anyway themselves. So it's a chicken and egg problem. Which group comes back first? So we need, I think, instead of us, you know, it's a general remark, but instead of us trying to find a reason to prosper as who we are back in Bulgaria, we need to find some way to bring those workers back, some clever idea to bring those people back, and they will create the opportunity for us to be who we are there. You
It's
see what I mean?
interesting that you think that it's the people who come first, and after that you have the settings within the country that contribute to it, whether infrastructure, education, liquidity, economic environment, business environment, everything. Diane first wants to finish.
I'll actually nominate Chris because I think our opinions overlap and he feels stronger about it.
No, thank you. No, I'm just too expressive, I suppose. I'll really try to be brief. I want to bring the topic to a bit of a more optimistic tone, so to speak. I want to give an example. Take Singapore. Singapore is an economy with 5.4 million people. It's the size in area, I think, of a little bit more than half of Sofia. And their economy is around $300 billion or even more, might be 400. I'm just to give a sense of how large this is. What they're doing, they've grown their land by 22% by reclaiming land from the sea. They're actually importing sand. They're the biggest importer of sand in the world. Singapore got separated around 1963 from Malaysia. Before that, it was part of the British Empire. In any case, Singapore at the time was an isolated piece of land that was a third world country. In less than 50, 60 years, it has become a first world country. There's actually a very interesting book by their, I think, ex-prime minister from third world to first. I started it, I haven't read it, but I really want to read it. If you want to do something kind of big and important in your community, in Bulgaria, wherever, I think it must be a good book to read. But I just want to give an example of something amazing that has been achieved. And here we're talking about, there's not enough financing for academia, whatever. If you go to Singapore, you'll be amazed. Compare it to Malaysia, where I've been involved over the last 9 months, and it's amazing the discrepancy that they have. And it wasn't through thinking, oh, we don't have enough funding, or we're too small, or whatever. Bulgaria is big enough. It has very smart people. So you need better leadership. You need better mentality of the general populace, where you believe that you have a vision of what you want to grow. If you want to grow an academic university that's the best in the world, I don't think that's impossible. I think it's extremely hard. I think you could achieve it, and you have plenty of extremely wealthy people around the world who you can convince to fund it. To give you a very stupid example, just to prove that you don't need to be pessimistic about all these things, I have two friends, Slovak and Iranian, they're a boyfriend and girlfriend. I met them in Malaysia. They came back to Slovakia. They're starting their own company. They're nowhere. They've worked for 2 years at startups. They don't know much. Over the last few weeks, they were able to raise almost 1 million euros for their startup from one of it's called the Jeremy Fund from the EU. Funds that they distribute. I helped them a bit with the application, giving them advice on how to go about it. You can achieve a lot more than you think, and saying, oh, there's not enough opportunity in Bulgaria, well, you can create it. And I'm not saying you can create it right away. It might take 10, 15, 20 years. My personal, take on it has been, I could stay at Goldman, I could make good money. That doesn't really do it for me. I can, run and do track and field. That does not boost my ego individualistically. I love that. But I think that at some point when I'm 30, 35, I want to start doing something to the community, for the society. At that point, I want to be financially independent and to have grown and matured enough to actually change something. So it's up to you to decide what is the path that you can take and what are the books, the lessons that people should speak to learn what the path is, but you can figure it out. So I wanted to put a more optimistic spin on it. I think I called back in the conversation.
That's exactly the point I was trying to make across. It really depends on you to make a change. And actually, just again as an example of the university, Telerik Academy, I don't know if you've heard of it, or it's just, I've been learning, I've actually been contemplating quitting my job and going there and I'm not even joking. The people that teach it are just incredibly smart, but they started the whole thing. So that academy was actually acquired by Telerik, and it was run entirely independently by these 3 dudes. And they were doing that. They were teaching people how to code and not only how to code, but how to become software engineers. And right now, they're just, I'm reading their books and I'm just doing. They're teaching me, and they're based there. They've probably I don't know, they recently got acquired by an American company, but me here, I'm learning here from the stuff that they're doing, and they built that academy, now everyone knows about it. And actually a sector that is growing back home is really strong actually is IT. Because we have like a track record of sciences, and they're really good. And like I actually came here when I was 16 for school, and I was shocked at how bad the maths is. For example, it was just, I mean, it set me back 5 years, and it was just you know, we have so many advantages actually. But if you go back home and everyone's on and on and on about like, oh, education's terrible, and like, you know, there's no. There's so many bright. It's just like we tend to be like really pessimistic. I think it's really like, you know. But people, to realize how good they have it or they could have it, they still need to kind of look out and see how it's like, you know, it's an individual incentive.
To bridge what Borisov and Krasik just said, if the question is, are there opportunities in Bulgaria? Yes, there definitely are opportunities. You can, if you work in technology, you can certainly build a very successful future in Bulgaria. Now, if you're not prepared to be flexible and just have a very narrow view for your future, then probably you won't be able to find your path in Bulgaria. I mean, if I want to be a theoretical physicist, then maybe I won't be able to prosper in Bulgaria, but that's not everything in the world. If I wanted, like, thinking how I could help Bulgaria, this is not by becoming a theoretical physicist. This is by doing something so that people have more opportunities in the future to build prosperous future, to find career paths, and to not be in the position where they decided that they're abroad and they have no reason to go back. Now, I know that Krasik is actually, his big dream is to revolutionize education in Bulgaria. And I'm pretty sure that he'll do it one day. And I believe that this is the first step. Like, if you want to create something big, you need to first create the environment for it.
Let's hear from Luba and then
I actually want to respond kind of to this term to optimism, because as I explained quite you that when it comes to academia and social science and humanities, Bulgaria cannot really help me individually, in my opinion, grow at the moment. In the future, perhaps this will change, but at the moment. However, that being said, one of the questions that keeps being raised is how can we as people abroad help back home? And I actually have two kind of points I kind of want to throw out. One of them is based around individual identity. Just by going around and telling people you're Bulgarian and all the achievements that you're attached to actually does help the image of the Bulgarian country. Rather than be equated with, what was the popular, immigrants coming to steal our jobs, as UKIP was trying to portray Bulgaria.
But
There's
we do.
also a lot of people saying
No, it's more trying to steal benefits, right?
benefits of jobs, yes. But the whole idea is that you can also, all the successes and everything that's attached to your name gets attached to the country, and it helps change this image. So all of a sudden, as you kind of put it in a strange way, there's a lot of people with brains here, as there are in Bulgaria. But the fact that they're here, they can say, look, we exist. And that is something very important. Through our own individual identity, we can help toward this joint group Bulgarian good identity. But the second point actually ties into what you want to do. There is a program that I'm not sure how many of you have heard of called Coursera. It piloted in the US, yep, where basically, for those of you who don't know, they take courses from leading universities around the world, leading professors who just donate their time and their materials. They create the course. It could be on semiotics, could be on theoretical physics, could be on mathematics. You take the online course, and then you get a certificate for having completed it. It's an alternative to university education, in which way you still get some skills, even not in a classroom setting. Something like that can quite easily be done for Bulgaria from people who are abroad. So people who are in academia in Bristol, Edinburgh, Bath, or Cambridge, they could easily write the course that we're already doing here, upload it on a platform. So that is a potential idea of how we can feed back to the country and change the education, give people access to this knowledge, rather than needing them to come out, keep broadening their horizons from within. So, in a way, I think there's a lot of things that we can do that, even if the conditions back home are not ready for us to go home yet, as in in my case, there's still other things we can do and not give up on being a theoretical physicist. Let's hear from
I like drawing conclusions, and from what has been said so far, it seems like, yeah, we're those amazing kids that have fought all their lives, they're smart, they're successful here, we've beaten the English in their own countries, in their own language, we've got that top jobs in Ernst & Young, the Big Four, we've got the amazing PhD scholarships everywhere. We look better than them. We do everything. I know. That's the truth. I'm just building it. And no, I'm not. That's the truth, and I believe in it.
I think you should delete that from the
And
send it to Nigel Farage.
So my question is it everything about money? Is it everything? Is that the main reason why we are here? Because if we are that amazing and successful and everything, and we are demonstrating it by being here, by organizing conferences for Bulgarians in English, demonstrating our achievements and everything. So is it just everything about money? Is that why we are here?
I don't know if anyone made that point. I don't think
Yeah, I
anyone said
don't
that.
agree with any of those
But
points.
you were just saying
Is it a question or is it an opinion? I don't.
Yeah,
none of us
I just want to address it because what has been discussed so far is that we can do things back home, but we lack the resources, the infrastructure, and so on. Or if you're in the industry, you're gonna get like 1/10 of the money back home and things like that. So my question is, why are we not making the step to go back home? Is it just because of the money? Is it just because of something else? Is it just because it's not good yet, what you have just said?
I think I will. So just to answer really quickly, I will make the move. It's just not now because I don't know enough yet, so that I can pass on like a really informed opinion of all the things I want to teach people. But like, okay, so my personal view of how my contribution, my 2 cents, if you want, would be like up until like maybe 30, 35, I'll build myself here, and then I'll go and teach people what I've learned basically. So similar to kind of what Jan was actually doing. Not expect money. I can do my kind of develop my own activities on the side, but like that's pretty much my plan. And everyone can do that with their respective fields. So like if I teach them about economics and finance and whatever, if someone's a brilliant mathematician or did theoretical physics in Oxford, you can actually go to like our math schools are incredible. There's some really bright kids, and just captivate their interest and like just teach them there rather than them having to come to Oxford. So it's just or Cambridge or whatever. So that's kind of the truth. It's not about money at all. I don't think anyone made that.
No, I'm not saying anyone made that point. I'm just like kind of like putting the question out there. So
In fact, we made the opposite point. It's not about the money. It's about your personal initiative.
You want
Oh yes, yeah, you really managed to depress me actually. I kind of have a small remark to the previous one, but it's a bit more philosophical about money, but why do you all want to be those amazing people that want to change the world? What's wrong with just be an ordinary happy person?
It's about your individual aspirations, what you want to do with your life. Just because someone, say, wants to live in a building in Bulgaria and work at the corner store, that is perfectly fine. If that is how they feel happy, then that is what they should do.
Yeah,
And there's
makes
absolutely
sense,
nothing
yeah.
wrong with it.
But now Krasi wants to change the world or change Bulgaria or something, and I feel crap for not wanting
No.
that.
But if everyone
happy
wanted
to
to
just
work
be
in a
here.
partnership, then no one would have changed ever the world. So that's why we want to have different people. One of them wanting to change the world, the other one working in a partnership. And it's not depressing, it's just good to have diversity.
We have a couple of other reflections.
Yeah, I think the general idea is you have the Maslow's pyramid. So because most of us have gone about the first 2 levels, job security, finance. So that's why some people here are enthusiastic about self-realizing themselves in somewhat of a higher form or serving to society. But my question to the panel is, how can you explain to someone, let's say from a working class background or middle class background, well, you know, we can stay both in Bulgaria and we can actually make something really good while I'm actually still staying outside of the country. So like, because I don't know personally myself, so I thought you might have some interesting ideas.
Could I address that one?
Yeah.
And also respond to Katya's thing. Actually, I don't want to sound like some kind of a superhero complex that I have. Not at all. In actuality, like my goal ever since I was a child was to just fall in love and have kids and be happy in Bulgaria, and that's it. And I was fine. I'm perfectly content with the corner shop. Like, if I fall in love, I'm thinking that if I find the right girl, that might steal me away from other things. But I think this is the second best thing I could do until that time. Regarding what the advice is and what you like, normal middle class people, I think it's not about, we're just trying to incite change of thinking. At least that's my goal and that's my thinking. It's not about me telling someone what to do. It's more about showing them how they could do it themselves and how they could have a better life. And to tie to also to the comment about Coursera, I love it. There's a course on irrational behavior by Daniel Ariely. He's this Israeli guy. He talks about many different interesting things, a very cool course. One of the most important was, and what you asked, like, is it all about the money? It's about the pursuit of happiness, obviously. And in one of the courses, one of the lectures, he said, he was explaining experiments, and basically the experiment was the following. If you give, I don't know, $100 to someone, and tell them you can spend them on yourself, or you can spend them on someone else. And they have two groups, etc. I don't need to explain how research works, but basically what came out is that you feel more happy if you spend your money, happier if you spend your money on someone else. They did it with your time, so they give you a day either to go to the salon and like do your hair and have a massage, whatever, or to go and, I don't know, and talk to kids, do whatever community work that you would like to do. And what came out is that you actually are happier when you're engaging with other people. And also when you compare giving money to giving your time, time was actually the thing that made you happier. And I think that's a complex in Bulgaria, and what you were saying about, oh, you have this complex about being a superhero, having a lot of money. No,
Don't say that.
no. I mean, I kind of felt like that might be one direction. But no, I think that people in Bulgaria and in many other places, but I think the discussion is very stifled in Bulgaria in particular, is you need to realize, if you're just better to the people around you and in the community and think about, okay, what can I change? Even tomorrow, like instead of just bitching about the trash out of the cans or no recycling or about corruption, I mean, don't give the 20 lefts to the cop that just stopped you for speeding. I mean, it's simple as that. And those are the things you need to do as a middle class warrior person, and teach your children that. That's the most important. More important than my aspirations. My aspirations are to spread that word to someone else and inspire them to actually do that. That's all I need. That's what I think is needed. Just different mentality.
I guess to an extent, I think Trace, just to kind of shift maybe the topic a little bit. From my musings, and that's a very personal opinion, so feel free to disagree and like destroy me. But it's that element of, again, personal initiative and like leading by example and like kind of doing the right thing even though like no one's expecting you to and all that. That's kind of a very, I encountered it here much more when I came, because it came when I was young and I came along. It's like, wow, okay, like you're not actually expecting, no one's expecting anything of you, but then if they don't, then if you don't have kind of that personal drive as well, like it's difficult to achieve things. And back home, I think that's kind of a leftover from kind of the totalitarian society where you kind of do your one thing and like your job or whatever, and then everything else is kind of taken care of by the state. And like it's just, I think, and then actually particularly in the older generation, I think there's that kind of mentality that certain things need to be taken care of, and like, oh well, they're not, so like why? Well, because it's crap. It's like the state's crap. There's actually quite a lot of hate is directed towards the state, but the state is that kind of anonymous agent that just is supposed to be miraculously doing things. So it's just.
I find that. I personally never lived in Bulgaria. I grew up outside, but one thing I find that is a problem with Bulgaria is that in Bulgaria, a lot of people always look for places that they want something.
Yeah.
So they never take responsibility. So I totally agree with that. And I think if something needs to change the mentality, it's exactly that. It's taking responsibility for not just what's your own, but for everything else you want.
Well, just to give you an example. Just to give you an example. For example, one of the fantastic members in the group actually is Stasi. So even in like in Western, very developed societies, you know, like for example, immigrants, they're not, you know, there's really kind of political sort of refugees, like they have it really hard. Like in the UK, they have it really hard. If you're a political refugee, like without a passport here, you can't escape. Like there's many books written on it. It's like it's a desperate thing. But you know what? Even states that are really wealthy and like rich and kind of rich by like a general standard, they still fail with that. And like to actually go and devote your time to go on the ground and like, so for example, do what you're doing, it's just like. I mean, you should kind of get familiar with what Stas is doing, but it's just really, that's kind of devoting your own time and changing something that no one probably like think of changing, and just like the state will be the last to kind of do that. And it's just, you know, you're an example for it. Like, it's just, maybe she should say what she's doing, but yeah.
Yeah, since we are running out of time, any final comments from the audience? No one from here is
actually, maybe an optimistic note. Is that
yeah, please.
We've had so many discussions, what it means for us to be here, what it means, what it will mean for us to return. And I think it is, in my case, I've really tried to go to the disjuncture, the perceived disjuncture. So I think we can be creative about thinking how to do that in our own fields, whatever they are. I think people are really open in Bulgaria, often to ideas and open to work with you. At least that has been my experience. I mean, I don't want to come in with rosy, glasses on, but generally speaking, we have been quite receptive, quite open, and very engaging, very capable people still there. So I think it's a matter for us to be creative, to think how we can use. Sometimes we have restraints, material and otherwise, that maybe don't allow us to do our full work there, but that doesn't mean that we can't be engaged in other ways. It doesn't mean that we can't still make connections to people there, to support people who are doing their work there that maybe we can't do from here. So I hope maybe we can put our creative hats on and think, despite some limitations that we have and constraints, there are ways that we can contribute still.
And you're a great example.
Hey, I want to give a counter-example to everything that we said today. I do maths, and I'm an undergraduate, and I've seen like the difference between the teaching system in Bulgaria and in England when it comes to mathematics. And I can say that Bulgaria, in terms of funding and in terms of environment, in terms of potential, is infinitely better than England when it comes to teaching school-level mathematics. Because our kids are very self-critical, they're very clever, they like getting things right, which in mathematics is very, very crucial. Kids in England seems to be kind of very, very used to getting stickers and stamps for every single stupid thing that they say, which in maths is not okay, because if it's stupid then it's not correct. It just doesn't work. So I would never, ever, ever consider teaching school children mathematics in England, because that's like really depressing. Just saying. Genuinely.
Final thoughts.
That is super optimistic, right?
I think from what you said, so children being self-critical and all that, actually, I think the base for doing good and like sort of tapping that potential that is in Bulgaria from very, very early on is kind of, going targeting the schools, because actually if there's one thing that's, again, kind of shocked me is in my experience here, in my experience back home is, and I think all of you just by being here is kind of like, you probably experienced that same thing, is like, my parents have always told me like, you need to be amazing in school, and like, what is this, like 591? Like crazy, and I think that attitude is actually pretty much still there, because it's just it's a Bulgarian, it genuinely is truly is a Bulgarian value for, we're like the Chinese and the Indian, that we really like, we are children and they get bad grades. So I think that kind of is embedded from an early age, but then kind of something happens along the way, and then
just to say, it's not talking about bad grades though, because that mentality, for example, in my family, my father very frequently used to tell me when I was in Bulgaria, for example, 6, why is it not a 6+? So that mentality can also be positive. It doesn't have to be.
Oh no, it comes from an academic background. You're coming from an academic family. Let's hear from Lily.
I think my final remark would be kind of also closing the whole conference. So if anyone has other remarks before that,
in the back there's
Just one more.
do you feel positive about the generation building up as a new kind of society in Bulgaria? Do you feel like a new generation of people building up through the system without the totalitarian regime will build up a society that might be better suited for motivation, inspiration, spark, as I said previously? If anyone experienced that kind of difference between...
Just personal opinion again, I feel like people on my age, like 20, 25, they're doing a lot of things in Bulgaria, they're starting new businesses, they're kind of changing the country. But when I looked at the new generation, like 13, 11 years old, I'm really, really scared about what's coming. I mean, it's really this, it's just personal opinion again, is this child mentality and going to the clubs, and it's like kind of losing balance.
I think that's going away though.
I disagree with that.
I think that's going away, and actually like my cousin's 13 and he's brilliant. Like he's just, and his environment, like just observing them and what they're kind of like doing. I think again, technology, like, you know, kids here get spoiled, and like basically parents give them the iPad to play games to be quiet.
But so do kids at home.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, maybe yes, but it's just kind of they're being indoor. There's always division, and in any society there's division. There's massive division here, so it can be used for a good thing. It can be used, you know, there's always going to be kids that are kind of messing around and, you know, kind of, you know, diverging on a bad path. But like, there's also those that do end like really being
To be honest, I don't think this has anything to do with nationality. This has to do with just generations and how different generations see each other. It's not about Bulgarian kids versus British kids, or even, you know, there is a theory actually that older generations, when they look at the younger, they always say, oh no, it's worse because we did this, this, and this. Yes, and then there's also people who look at the younger and say, look at all this technological innovation. So it depends on what perspective you come from and what you're comparing it to.
So I think we are slightly diverging from the general topic. So any final comments? Yes.
I get the impression that everybody is looking at the system as something static, and in fact it is a mechanism which could be influenced by actions. So how many get tried to use the mechanism which the state provides to change the state situation?
What is the mechanism that the state provides?
For example, different institutions, there are different channels to give proposals or ideas, something to be changed. Just kind of curious how many of you tried to do this?
I have actually from my research, and I got blackballed with the memo. So obviously that's just an example, but it's not. It's a lot about luck, I think, in my perception, when it comes to institution. Who's going to be at the desk, whether their coffee will be nice, and whether they feel happy that day.
I don't think the development of the country should be based on that. So just to kind of wrap up and give the floor to Veli, I just want to say that for someone like me studying development studies, the development of areas, countries, region is a very dear topic, and human capital is something so important. Seeing the brain drain going out of the country is kind of makes it very, very difficult. But it also links to the capacity of the state, because it always comes back to the productive capacity of the country and how well you produce things and how well you perform in different sectors and different industries. And if you don't have the infrastructure and business environment and the human capital, part of which is here today, it's kind of impossible to have any environment in which any business, any great idea can flourish, which is of course not to discourage any of you to pursue any of these ideas, but in the end of the day, I think it all boils down to what your objective is, what makes you happy. Is it to be a superhero in the world and change the world and find the cure for cancer in the UK, or go back and work, try to build something from a grassroots perspective and try to change how things are there. So with this, I'd like to close the discussion and invite Veli to probably say some words.
I've heard some people kind of being unhappy why we're speaking in English today, and I wanted to clarify this, that we're trying to, although it's just Bulgarians primarily, there are some non-Bulgarians as well, they're a minority, and the main reason though is that we afterwards upload all of the talks if the speakers do not have no reasons to want them to be kept secret, but we upload all the talks in a YouTube channel. So we are trying to not only keep this within this one room, but try to share with other people that we know of that couldn't be here now, hopefully share with people back home as well, but not only them. And in the end, in order to kind of wrap up everything that now probably doesn't need to be in English anymore, искам да използвам възможността да благодаря на всички, за които дойдоха. За мен беше голямо удоволствие не само да чуя това, което се случва, да видя, че нещо такова като организацията на конференции може да се случи само от хора, които си вършат цялата друга работа, взимат си изпити, правят си PhD-та, работят каквото работят и въпреки това отделят някакво време, за да направят нещо, което да събере всички нас тук. За мен хората, с които имам възможността да работя в CantaBulgarian, ме карат да не искам нищо друго, като нещо, което да се възвръща от цялата работа. Възможността наистина да среща такива хора. За мен е важно повече хора да знаят, че има такива хора. И заради това мисля, че всички сме тук. Дали имаме, говорим за неща, които общо всички знаят. Да, но е хубаво да им се напомня. Според мен хората забравят, особено когато живее среда далече от това, което виждаме ние тук. Накрая искам да завърша с нещо, което е една мисъл от един роман, който вършим на всички. Това е Лавира на Блага Димитрова. И мисълта е следната: да върви там, където има път, да върви свой път, върви там, където няма път и остави следи. Така че мисля, че всеки един от нас с начин си на мислене започва да върви се опитва да гради свой собствен път, в който да оставя следи. Надявам се да бъдат видяни от някого и да не се превърнат като някаква лавина, да бъде затрупана и никой да няма види. Така че се надявам с конференция като тази да имаме възможност да оставим наистина следите и да други хора да се възползват от тази пътека, докато станат готови да изградят своя. Благодаря ви.